Hello, I'm Will Troughton, curator of photography here at the National Library of Wales in Frith, and today I'd like to talk about some of our collections which cover large parts of Wales, if not even the whole of Wales in some cases. I'm going to look at four particular examples. The first is Geoff Charles. It's the largest individual collection we have of Welsh material. It runs to about 100,000 negatives altogether, and it covers the whole of his career from the late 1930s up until his retirement in the late 1970s. There are numerous topics that he covered. He covered all sorts of aspects of Welsh life. We can see some here. I have in front of me a photograph of a German plane that was brought down in 1941 and crash landed near Dinas Mawddwy. In 1963, Geoff Charles did an agricultural story on this particular farm, and afterwards he was invited in for tea, and when they got inside the house, he noticed that the oatcakes, the butter, the jam, that everything he was offered was homemade. And this is a wonderful view of the farmer's wife preparing their tea. Another photograph, which is a particular favourite of mine, is this view of the last postman to use a horse to deliver letters. He had a round between Tregaron and Abergwesin in mid-Wales, and I think this is a wonderful view of him delivering letters to a remote farm. We also have another view of something that's long past. These two farmhands who lived in the Lloft Stabal, a loft literally above the stable as they were working on the farm. And you can see the sort of Spartan conditions they have. You can see their clothes hanging up. You can even see a bit of snow on their boots. It was taken in January on a farm in Anglesey. This photo is from 1946 on the National Eisteddfod. It shows Frith speaking to Princess Elizabeth, later of course the Queen. Geoff Charles really missed the National Eisteddfod. Many of his photos of the National Eisteddfod have become quite iconic and record numerous people and events. In this shot we see the booking office at Blaenau Ffestiniog railway station. Railways were one of Geoff Charles's particular favourite hobbies, and there are numerous photographs of railways throughout Wales in the collection. Geoff Charles retired in the late 1970s. He continued doing some freelance work, mainly for agricultural publications later on, and then he donated his collection of over 100,000 negatives to the National Library of Wales. Most of these have now been digitised and are available on our website. John Thomas is another photographer who travelled widely across Wales. He was born in 1838 in Llandysul, and by the 1870s he was establishing himself as a photographer. His collection of negatives consists of three really main themes. Many are portraits, particularly of ministers of religion. These he turned into cartes de visite and cabinet cards, and he would sell these in markets and fairs around Wales. This seem a bit strange to us in this day and age, but when you think that back in that time newspapers were a rarity, there was no television, there was no cinema, there was no radio, so much of the information people received about the outside world and the information that helped them to form their political and religious views came from the people they heard in the pulpit, hence the popularity of these cartes de visite. Perhaps from our point of view though, many of his most interesting photographs are the topographical views that he took. These include the ships here against the quayside in Aberdyfi, a snow scene at Llandysul, and this small whitewashed building here that you can see, which on closer examination it turns out is actually a small public house. John Thomas also photographed people in their places of work, and he would be sure, he recorded to always go at midday, and that was for two reasons. Firstly, that the light was a lot better at midday, and secondly, he wanted to make sure if he was taking photographs like this that it didn't impinge on their work, so the photographs would be taken in the people's lunch hour, and therefore their employers would be happier with John Thomas turning up with his camera to take the photos. And a perfect example of this is the staff outside Letterston Post Office here in Pembrokeshire. Francis Frith is a name familiar to anybody who has an interest in old photographs. In the library, we're fortunate we have approximately 20,000 images taken by Francis Frith. They come in two main series, the earliest series from about 1880 up until the 1930s or so, and then there's a second series which dates from the 1950s and 1960s. And you can see here some examples of views of Abergele from the 1890s. Can you various street scenes. We know the date of these because, as you can see, each one has a serial number, and fortunately the list of serial numbers relating to the years in which they arrived in the Francis Frith archive are available, so we know these photos actually date from 1890. And here you can see some views of Abergele from the 1950s and perhaps early 1960s. The final photographer, who I think is of national significance, that I'd like to draw your attention to is Dai Evans, who went under the name of Adine Surreal, and as you might imagine, his photographs tend to be quite surreal. This is one example here. I won't tell you the title just yet, but if you haven't yet worked it out, it's called Saved by Van Gogh. Other examples of his work are this one here, Chill Out Chamber, Whitewash, and Rockfall. We're fortunate to have somewhere in the region of 70 of Dai Evans's original prints, and they're a wonderful collection and they give you a completely different take on photography.